One of the most unsettling memories from my childhood occurred when I was around 9 years old, likely in the late months of 1978 or early 1979, placing me in the 4th grade at that time. Providing some context, my school was a relatively new addition to the district, featuring an experimental architectural design devoid of square angles in its walls. To simplify, envision a U-shaped layout, with the opening facing the parking lot. Hexagonal structures known as pods were attached to the outer edge of the U, with each pod further divided into 6 classrooms and a central area. This central space offered a vantage point, allowing someone to peer into any of the 6 classrooms simultaneously. The playground encompassed the entire exterior beyond the U-shaped collection of pods, starting with blacktop near the school and extending to a grassy field farther out. Importantly, this design meant that standing in close proximity to the pods could result in someone else, also near the pods, being within 20 feet of you yet concealed around the bend of the wall. In the late months of 1978 or 1979, my school hosted an open house or parent-teacher conferences. These events provided parents an opportunity to engage with one another and, notably, to confer with their children's teachers about academic progress. My mom, ever diligent, never missed one of these gatherings, and this occasion was no exception. The school's cafeteria buzzed with activity as teachers, kids, and parents mingled. After the principal's introductory address, everyone dispersed for one-on-one meetings. My mom had discussions planned for both my older brother, a year ahead of me, and me. When we met my teacher, Mrs. Holbrook, my mom had encouraging remarks for me, and we swiftly concluded our meeting. However, when it came time to meet my older brother's teacher, Mr. Covey, my mom unexpectedly instructed me to head out to the playground and play while my brother remained in the classroom. Though it was still daylight, a considerable amount of time had passed since the principal's speech. Parents attending only for a brief meeting or those with a single teacher to consult had likely come and gone. The playground, once filled with people, now lay empty. Unconcerned, I wandered around the pods as if in my own home, staying close to the outer wall for no particular reason. Suddenly, without any warning, a sharp pinch across the back of my neck jolted me. The grip was formidable, preventing any attempt to break free. Before I could react, a voice whispered in my ear, instructing me to remain still and refrain from turning around. I nodded as best as I could. The voice then directed me to walk, leading me around the pod until the parking lot came into view, where a few cars remained. The voice asked if I saw the green station wagon with wooden paneling. I confirmed, and the voice instructed me to walk to that car, get inside, and wait. Do not turn around. It will be right behind you if you turn around. Do you understand me? Throughout, the hand at my neck tightened periodically, accentuating key points with emphasis. The unseen presence continued to guide me toward that car, and with each step, I felt an eerie resonance with the condemned walking toward their fate. Though I was a naive boy, even at that age, I couldn't bring myself to believe that getting into that car was a wise decision. However, the fear of what might happen if I turned around outweighed my reservations. Halfway to the car, I found myself frozen, grappling with uncertainty. Standing still was an improvement over the initial fear, and I lingered there for what felt like both seconds and minutes before eventually turning around. To my relief, nobody was there. I suspected they might be lurking behind the pod, observing and waiting. However, my mom was in that direction, too, so I chose a wide arc around the playground area as I cautiously retraced my steps. Near the spot where I had been pinched, 2 boys from my brother's grade, Roger and another whose name I never knew, played marbles. They seemed unrelated to the incident. I was convinced they, especially Roger, were the culprits behind the pinch. However, as I passed them from a distance, they showed no reaction. Oddly enough, my brother later spoke positively about Roger, leaving me astonished. He was apparently a nice guy. In hindsight, I considered the whispered voice and the forceful hand, leaning toward the likelihood that it belonged to an adult male rather than another child. The mystery deepened as I pondered why this person wanted me inside Mr. Covey's car. Since Mr. Covey was engaged in a conference with my mom, he was not the culprit. My only other speculation led me to my third-grade teacher, Dr. Schofield, who had once violently grabbed me in class when I stood up without permission. Intriguingly, that same year, in 1980, Dr. Schofield was arrested on suspicion of molesting 4 boys, a revelation that unfolded a year after my unsettling playground encounter. I may never know for certain, but the lingering question of who it was will always haunt me. Throughout my high school years, there was a teacher I dubbed Creepy Creep, and as you'll soon see, the name was well earned. The peculiar saga began in my freshman year when this teacher served as an inclusion teacher, responsible for caring for special needs students integrated into regular classes. Creepy Creep always appeared isolated, sparking my sympathy. One day, in a misguided attempt at kindness, I complimented him on his haircut. Little did I know that this simple gesture would lead to him seemingly always being in close proximity. Later that year, after breaking my toe at a haunted house, he cornered me in the hallway, advising me to steer clear of such places. I chuckled it off initially, but the realization struck me later that it was odd he knew how I broke my toe, considering I hadn't shared it with anyone at school. In the following school year, he consistently joined me at my lunch table until my friends arrived. On one occasion, I witnessed him tripping on the stairs. Despite initially appearing unharmed, he broke into tears upon realizing I had witnessed the incident. That day, he sat with me at lunch, apologizing profusely for the perceived embarrassment. Come my junior year, he welcomed me with an overzealous hug on the first day, expressing how much he missed me over the summer. Throughout the year, he continued sitting with me at lunch, even after my friends joined. He asserted that my friends weren't true friends if they had issues with us sitting together. During one lunch, as I spoke about leaving early for a dentist appointment, he inquired about the departure time. I mentioned it was right after lunch, and to my relief, a few minutes later, he left, a moment for which I was sincerely grateful. Once I got to my car to leave, it wouldn't start. Creepy Creep just happened to be out there, though, and offered to give me a ride home. I told him it was fine because my stepdad was on his way to get me, and anyways, I had to get back to school. Creepy Creep told me it wouldn't take any time for him to take me home since my house was just down the road. That's when I got really freaked out because he knew where I lived. Luckily, my stepdad showed up just in time. Creepy Creep introduced himself to my stepdad, saying it was nice to finally meet the man who raised such a beautiful girl. In my senior year, I ended up going to a different school. I got a new job as a delivery driver. About a week into the job, there was a special note on the bottom of the delivery saying, "Use the back door, and you can just walk in." This wasn't too odd to me because sometimes that's a common note on deliveries for elderly people who can't make it to the door. So, I made it to the delivery and went inside, but it was none other than Creepy Creep. When I walked in, he went in for a kiss, telling me how much he missed me. I was so terrified because not only was this Mr. Creepy stalking teacher, but he also just kissed me. He told me how upset he was to not hear from me on our 2-year anniversary, but he said he understood because it's hard to keep in touch after being at different schools. He asked me to quit my job and just stay with him for the rest of the day so we could celebrate our anniversary the proper way. Luckily, my boss called, yelling at me for taking so long on the delivery. So I told Creepy Creep that I had to go quit my job in person so I wouldn't get in trouble for keeping the money from his delivery. Then I would come right back. He was so happy and said he was so excited to see me putting more effort into our relationship. So I quit my job, then went straight home and told my parents everything. I never heard from Creepy Creep ever again. I don't want to give too much away about my personality, but I would say it takes place in a small town in Ontario where I grew up in 7th grade, so me and everyone else in my class would have been about 12 years old in the first part. We had a substitute teacher in 7th grade. I am a real teacher, mister. I was there alone. C returned from sick leave with mental health issues, we later learned. I was great and he left after winter break. C showed that he was kind of a creep from the beginning. He made a lot of little creepy comments that we would let slide, but eventually one encounter escalated. I remember one day during recess he tried to take me and a friend Rachel, saying different words for the penis and asking us if it is comfortable for us to say such words, etc. We decided to tell the parents of those young girls, and they got upset and called the school because obviously they didn't do anything about it, because otherwise the rest of it wouldn't have happened. Fast forward some creepy signs. Rachel and Jim, the rest of our class is about 20 kids, were doing the gymnastics part of our gym program. We're halfway through class and Rachel got up and left. It was part of the gym where we were going to leave our shoes, so a little later I turned around to look for him, and to my surprise he was shocked standing in front of the gym with a video camera in hand. Haven't put 2 and 2 together yet, but what happens next is basically pretty damn fast. Mister at the time, C, who was lying in the gym doing nothing, sees Rachel with this camera. Swear to God her face is horrified because she doesn't have a care in the world, and within a second they grab a nearby soccer ball. In front of the 12-year-olds, he threw Rachel across the room and hit her in the face and dropped the camera and screamed and ran out of the room, and me and the others went into the office. The class followed him out of the room before Mr. C could have done who knows what else, grabbed this camera and ran out of school. I never saw her again. Rachel's kind parents, who happened to live on the same street as me and chatted with me from time to time, we later found out they filed charges. He was charged with assault and battery on a minor, and also with intent to harm, or he was taping our class since he started teaching us the most obvious aspects of everything we were going to do that day. Needless to say, we got a new teacher for the rest of the year, which was kind of awesome to say the least, because she let us do whatever we wanted. From casually walking into our dressing rooms to extensive sex-related health classes, it seemed too scary. So when I was a freshman in high school, I had a teacher named Dr. Johansson taught civics in my class. It was a special companion like other teachers. The new school teachers I attended were often not socially close to the students. They were just there to teach, and only Dr. Johansson liked to connect with students, so he decided it would be easier to do that. So he had a Facebook account. He started adding people from our school on Facebook, and eventually they started talking to them often, posting strange things on his wall and strange comments they wrote. For example, one time he posted NWA's Straight Outta Compton and wrote that all he said was N-word, 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 N-word. Of course I don't understand. Some students commented and asked him why he sang like that. He used the N-word so freely that he deleted the post and apologized. He blamed it on being drunk, and it was nothing. He started talking to students, mostly boys, and he managed to get some students' numbers and started texting them randomly. He needs help with his homework. He could come over to my house and I could help you drink a glass of wine, and that's what he would say to teenagers who are under 18. So by law they aren't even allowed to drink, and those underage are not allowed to drink alcohol, he suggested. Remember, he's a civics teacher. He should know this stuff by heart, and it's morals, for God's sake. He never texted me anyway, but later he sent a weird text to my friends. Then he decided to talk to me. A few weeks after he started contacting students like this, he was talking to me on Facebook, asking me, how do you get girls? Do you have a big dick? Do you often sleep with girls after shows? Because I'm an artist and I found these messages very disturbing, and the messages got worse. He must be such a stud in bed. We were probably really good, and go down the rabbit hole with me. I'll take care of you. I don't need to understand what that means. And that wasn't even all. After a while things got out of hand. He started going out. He started asking me to go clubbing with him, and I wasn't old enough then, and he said he could take me clubbing. No ID, and I said I'll be fine. I said no. He must have got mad at me, and since I turned him down a few times, he decided not to talk to me much. Instead he started talking to one of my best friends. Ended with Dr. Johansson sends my friend a picture of her ass. Please take it from behind, with the caption, my friend was 17. Johnson was in his mid-30s, going to court, and Dr. Johansson received a small sentence of doing community service and then having to pay a fine to my friend. Johansson still works at the school today and is completely accepted. I see so many wrong people making so many mistakes that such a person should not be able to re-enter the workforce. Things could have been worse. I was about 5 years old when my parents decided to follow the typical Chinese stereotype of making me play piano or violin instead of any other instrument. Although it should have been piano or violin, I decided on violin because everyone in my family or daughter already had a piano. I wanted to be a little different with my lessons because my parents didn't speak English very well and they wanted Chinese-speaking teachers, which, given how rare my first violin teacher was quite helpful in practical situations. We had to travel about 40 minutes by train to see him every week, and he was also quite strict and had little patience for a 5-year-old violinist, so my parents and I went to Mr. Chan. Was a violinist, I guess, to be in his mid-30s. His price was cheap and he also visited the house, and we were quite happy for Mr. Chan was a soft-spoken person, and when I was a child I thought he was the most beautiful person in the world. Whenever he came to me he always gave me a piece of candy and gave me a hug when the class was over. It meant that he often looked at me with these burning eyes as a child, but I thought maybe it was just what he liked, but sometimes it felt like he was looking into my soul when I was being taught. Instead of telling me to put your finger on the E string now, he would gently move it for me whenever there was an opportunity to touch me. He would always move my fingers to match my arms and head to his posture. I basically took those things away from him because I was a kid who didn't know anything very well, because he was a great violin teacher and I legitimately learned a lot from him. One day, Chan stopped coming to classes and I had to find a new teacher. I cried and got really angry because I thought he was the nicest guy ever and I missed the sweets. My family refused to explain why he left when I was 12. Apparently Mr. to bring me news of what happened. One of Chan's violin students was arrested for molesting another girl my age. I wonder if he had the same fascination with her. I wasn't that great. My teacher was a very sweet lady, the kind who would call you baby and sugar and all that. She was very laid back and patient. Then she got ill, flu symptoms. She took a couple of weeks off on some days, but had to come back because she couldn't continuously keep taking off, and she looked worse than when she initially took sick leave. She was very feverish and flu-like, but she was very agitated. She couldn't hold still, had a bad temper, her mouth kind of slacked on the left side like she had a stroke or something. She was snappy and talking to herself, saying things like, "I should probably go to the doctor," and biting her nails. She had bitten so much they bled. Then things got nasty. One kid who was slightly special couldn't understand a worksheet, and she completely lost it. She was throwing stuff and calling him awful names. When I tried to intervene, she came at me and tried to bite me, like she was foaming at the mouth and trying to attack me. But by the time people finally found out what was going down, she was on the floor having a grand mal seizure, foaming, her eyes rolling in the back of her head. Sometime later, I found out that she had died shortly thereafter. Trying to find out what happened, police went to her house where they found her dead dog and a dead raccoon somewhere in the house. All three tested positive for the rabies virus. I still have nightmares about her, and I always keep my animals up to date with vaccinations. This happened when I was in 9th grade. I had matured early, so I received a lot of gross comments in 7th through 9th grade. This made me lose confidence in myself. So instead of being very sociable and outgoing like I used to be, I was shy and awkward. I had 0 friends, literally 0. So teachers often came up to me and asked if I was lonely, showed interest in me because I seemed depressed or whatever. My English teacher's name was Mr. Z. He had the creepiest blue eyes, and his smile was even creepier. On the first day of school, he asked us all about ourselves, our favorite subjects, and our names. But he always called on me even though I never raised my hand. When he asked me, I would speak quietly because everyone stared at me, and it made him laugh. He used to call me Good Heart. Towards the middle of the year, I noticed that he showed me a lot of favoritism. If he took away our privileges to go to the bathroom, he would say something like, "Take this to the office," and then whisper, "Go to the bathroom if you have to." When we received our progress reports, I would have A's on assignments I had never done. I never told anyone about that because English was a class I had to pass to graduate. As the school year went on, I started to realize that he never looked me in the eyes. He would stare at my chest, then my legs, at the floor, etc. And when he did look at me, he barely blinked, which made me look away instead, and it was very awkward. When I first noticed him blatantly staring at my chest, I didn't think much of it at the time because I'm not very blessed in the chest, so guys usually look at my butt instead. I just figured there was something on my shirt the first few times. Towards the end of the year, he started asking me to come into his room during lunch so I could help him grade. And I came to his room, he'd have a movie on, and we'd watch that for my lunch. He didn't have to teach a class after, so he let me skip my class afterward. One thing I noticed right away was that there were sex scenes in every movie we watched. He asked me if I wanted to skip, and I'd shrug because I wanted to act mature. It started to happen every day. We'd watch a movie every day, which all had very awkward sex scenes. At the end of the school year, we watched our last movie, and this time the scene was very long and very detailed and very awkward. He put his hand on my leg gently and laughed. "It'll be over soon," he said. He kept his hand on my leg for the whole thing. Luckily, when the bell rang, I left. I didn't say bye, I just left. The reason why I wrote this is because I saw him at Petco, my job, a week ago. I didn't think he'd recognize me. I wear glasses now, dyed my hair blonde, and lost a little weight. I was helping one line of people, which had about 5 people in it, and my coworker was working with a line that had 2. He stood in my line and waited for everyone to finish, even though the other line was empty. When I took his things, avoiding eye contact the whole time, he stared at me. I didn't look up because I didn't want to meet his gaze. Towards the end of the transaction, he started asking me about my life, did I like my job, how my family was doing, etc. I just gave him short, simple answers while he drilled a hole in my face with his eyes. After we were finished, he smiled and said, "I'll be back again, good heart." After freshman year, he was no longer a teacher at my school. I never found out why. This happened to my music teacher when I was in 5th grade. He was just filling in for my usual music teacher who had been operated for several months. He was getting very old, he was always sweating, his hands didn't move, and shifty eyes, and it was so creepy in the 5th grade that I was already developing and all that good stuff, and I admired my older sister and wanted to be like her, and she would wear these little mini skirts and I was dying to make my mom better. She didn't mind, she didn't even want her big daughter to dress like that. She bought me these were skirts called skorts, but they have shorts in them so she looks at the skirt or something. Don't look at the goods. So anyway, she shows up and immediately creeps me out. She's pretty enough, she's just super, it has a creepy vibe. It's also really shifty and confused, almost unnerving, just really weird in general. And the comments started. He was harassing me saying my skirts were too short. I told them they made shorts. He said he knew I was lying. On many occasions he told me that he saw creepy comments about my outfits every day and would dig a hole in me for it. He wouldn't treat any student like that. I told my mom, who was serious. She went to my principal and they set up a meeting between the principal and the vice principal, the creepy teacher in question, and my mom and dad. My mom is very short and skinny, but my dad is like 6'2" and 250 pounds of muscle, and he is very protective of me, so I'm not sure what happened on that date, but I know my dad never said a word to him. The man looked at her the whole time like, "I know you're creeping out my daughter. I'm not afraid to hurt you," and my mom went to her. They really let her. They kept changing her story. It was noted that they took the note back and promptly canceled it because they finished the plane and got caught with several lies. Go to a high school with about 400 students per class. but we only have about 100 students take AP Physics each year, so I only have one teacher for the subject. A longtime physics teacher retired, so the school board that hired her called her will do, sir. From the first day of school, everyone could tell he was different. He would get upset over the smallest things, like someone spelling formulas wrong. He would make over 5 students cry in the first week of school. My chem teachers was the head of the subject department, so these actions bothered him a lot. One day he would talk to him about it, and if he had to make some changes or if a student needed to be corrected, he wasn't there. Was in his room, but he found a pillow. And a few of his sleeping bags and clothes were hanging in the teacher's closet in each room. It looked a little suspicious, but he didn't think too much of it and forgot about it. And in December, my teacher's son was in the orchestra school and he was supposed to pick it up around 11 o'clock. Since there was a game away, he noticed that the car was still there, which made him even more suspicious, because what teacher would really be there at 11 p.m.? As of the following week, on Saturday night, Mr. the Psych's outburst got worse, and the next Saturday the students were more scared of him. My teacher's kids had sick stomachs, so he went to the old Walmart for ginger ale and decided to go to school on the way home. The next week, the physics students' Mr. Psych's car was still there. Psychs would be leaving that week, and they could either skip the class without penalty on the transcript or take the class online on the first day of Christmas break. The janitor who cleaned the school texted my teacher and said, "Sykes was standing in an empty classroom staring at a wall," she said, when she went to call the police. And if the police were still there, 5 hours later, Aaron had my principal, vice principal, and the police by the wall. A week later, to send him off, my teacher was checking the supplies in the room and was sure everything was fine when he went through the drawer and found various things like a razor, rat poison, and acid. I was wondering what someone was planning to do with them, with a rebus story about their creepy teacher and his lewd actions towards them. Gory was an English teacher at Davies Technical High School, who gave us tons of work to keep us busy, mostly copying notes from our first month at school. I knew there was something about him. He once referred to a script after reading it out loud. A story by Edgar Allan Poe, where there was a serial killer and he chose girls with natural blonde hair from his class to demonstrate how the killer chooses his victims. I had dark brown hair and always felt creepy around him due to these failures and a few other reasons. Halfway through the year, I moved to my local high school. Last year it became clear that I had made the right move. Told me that Gory was arrested for downloading child porn on his computer and having an affair with a 16-year-old student.